All
Yeah.
right, everybody, welcome. I see our friends signing on. I was just chatting with my friend Kim Wehle about a an award ceremony I went to last night, where U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro was there, and our friend Tim Heaphy was there receiving an award for the work he did on the January 6th House Select Committee, and it was a very interesting evening. But I'll jump onto our community meeting later tonight, and I'll talk about that. But I want to give people just a couple of minutes to sign on, and then we'll get going. We're going to do kind of a legal roundup, some of the legal stories over the course of the past 48 hours, and what we think they may signal. We don't have a crystal ball, but I think there have been a number of encouraging developments. As always, there have been a few discouraging developments, but I would like to think that maybe we're beginning to head in a better direction, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So, all right, we're going to count down. I know Marie typically counts us down, but I'm going to count us down and then we're going to get going. All right, three, two, one. Welcome, everybody. I have my friend Kim Wehle back with us again. I know you are familiar with her. She is not only an ABC legal analyst, she is a tenured law professor at the Baltimore University School of Law. She is a constitutional scholar. She is an author of lots of books. For example, What You Need to Know About Voting and Why, How to Think Like a Lawyer and Why, the ever popular Pardon Power, and the only one that is still over on my bookcase is How to Read the Constitution and Why. These are remarkable reads. I read every one and I learned a great deal. So, Kim, thanks for jumping on with us. I am really looking forward to just kind of doing a legal roundup today.
Thanks for having me, Glenn. You know how much I enjoy chatting with you both on Substack, and offline. It's been one of the benefits of the Trump years is getting to know someone like you. It's that's we got to count our blessings, Glenn. Right? We really
Yeah,
do.
we're all in the fight for justice, for democracy, and I appreciate being able to fight with you as a fellow justice warrior. So I'm going to just list some stuff that has happened over the last 48 hours, and then I'm going to toss it to you, and you kind of talk about what you think are some of the more significant developments and what we can read into them. So we have to start with the election results. I mean, it was damn near a clean sweep. I think when I saw things like my home state of New Jersey. I'm a gutter kid from Jersey. And I saw that counties like Passaic, which went for Trump in the last election, went like 12 or 14 points for Mikey Sherrill. That is an unbelievable turnaround in a short period of time. So I, was feeling good after the election results. We'll see how long that good feeling lasts. But if we add that together with, I think, a SCOTUS argument on the tariffs that, we saw even some of the kind of right wing conservative justices say some things that were really critical about what Donald Trump, the Department of Justice, Solicitor General John Sauer, were trying to sell to the justices about this being a presidential power. We have a judge ruling on the SNAP issue, right? Food assistance, ordering the administration, no, you're going to start releasing those emergency SNAP funds right the F now. That's not exactly how the judge put it. That's my interpretation. And it looks like the most recent reporting is the Trump administration has relented and said, okay, okay, you got us. We'll do it. We'll see if that holds for the next 30 minutes. You've got the not guilty verdict in the guy who threw a sandwich at a federal officer. And I don't think in my entire career as a federal prosecutor, I ever celebrated a not guilty verdict, an acquittal. But you know what? This one, I'm sorry. The conscience of the community sitting in that wooden box in Washington, D.C., 12 people said, no, not guilty. You are not going to try to put this stuff past us. You've got both the Comey and Letitia James prosecutions that look like they are struggling. I have a feeling they're going to fall apart sooner rather than later. And the issues go on, but kind of that whole batch of legal issues, including the election results. Like, what do you make of it? Where, if you were to take the pulse right now of democracy,
Mhm.
How are we doing? Where are we headed?
Well, um, I think the good news from the election results is, as you indicate, it looks like people who either sat out the last election, and some people think that's why Kamala Harris didn't win, is because for single issue voters around Gaza, for example, they just, I can't do that. I have, um, I just can't vote for that kind of person on whatever the issue is. I think it's demonstrating people are understanding finally, hopefully, that stopping this train wreck of fascism under Donald Trump is the number one priority. And, the Republicans probably didn't put their, their guts into this in the way they will for 2026. There's a lot of shenanigans going on in terms of preparing for the midterms. So I hope what people take out of this is the only way that we are going to turn this around is with millions, millions of Americans, millions, not just the people that have been in this fight like you and I and your followers for a long time, realizing how serious it is, but many, many more people. The SNAP benefits and the fact that we're beyond um, we're longest shutdown in the history of America, which is about doubling people's healthcare insurance premiums. We're on the verge at 11th hour. Hopefully, it'll turn around of 42 million people, something like that, without SNAP benefits, and we're talking a couple $100 a month. I mean, when people are really struggling in the United States, millions of children, and and we've got delays in airports, right? Where I mean, this is starting, Glenn, to affect people's lives. People who say, "I don't watch politics," or, that's just not something I pay attention to, or it's just too stressful for me, or that's inside the beltway, or they're all corrupt, or I don't know what's true. I mean, people are finally saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is not good for me. What's going on?" Um, and that to me is the good news about the election, but I think we have to be very, very careful to pack up and go home, which tends to be what some people do. Like, oh, I don't need to worry now. Midterms, it's all fixed. No, no, no. We're just beginning. I mean, we are just starting, and that's the crucial thing. And I hope that this continues. Um, the tariff the tariff case, I think, is an interesting one, and you mentioned with respect to SNAP benefits, okay, that the administration is signaled that they're going to go along with this ruling. I think that's really, at the end of the day, what we're seeing probably inside the justices' minds around tariffs. And you and I have said this for a long time. Trump has already ignored lots of lower court orders. It's not very well reported, but significant numbers. And as you know, the Justice Department has submitted affidavits that judges have found contain lies and falsehoods. Inconceivable, inconceivable. So that kind of infection of the judicial system is happening below. The justices have to wonder, okay, if we really say no to him on something, will he wake up one day and say, "I'm done with this Supreme Court. It's a fake court. They're corrupt. It's bogus. It's fake." I mean, that's always going to be, I think, a concern, and it's a concern that the Republican Party got itself into and got us all into, including those justices.
And do you
Um,
think, Kim, that enters into the justices' decision making in cases, their actual fear of losing their own power in the event a runaway chief executive officer says, "I'm not obeying your order and you can't make me"? Do you think, I know we don't have crystal balls, we can't look into their minds, but do you think that factors into their decisions?
I think it has to, because this court is drunk on its own power. I mean, the way reversing precedent, distorting the plain language of the United States Constitution, manufacturing immunity for presidents, which is a lot of reason why we're here. There's no checks on this man, and we all knew who he was before he took office. People voted for him knowing who he was. We're going to see historians. I think, I don't know if we'll be around anymore. But Glenn, there's going to be a direct line from Trump versus U.S. that immunity decision to where we are and hopefully where we'll get out of. And it's going to be very hard to rebuild the institutions that are demolished in this moment. Now, I do think it was clear Justices Kavanaugh and Alito are going to vote for Donald Trump in this tariff case. But just so your viewers understand, and you mentioned it, the bottom line is the U.S. Constitution gives the Congress express power to over tariffs. Congress passed a law relating to emergency powers. It says nothing about tariffs. Donald Trump used that to basically take the power from Congress for himself. In the lower courts, his lawyers argued that, listen, that statute should be read more broadly. In the Supreme Court, they've kind of taken a new tune. They're basically saying, we don't need the statute. This is foreign affairs, which is the president's authority. That's not in the Constitution, but essentially saying the ability to do foreign affairs requires basically Congress's power over tariffs. So if the Supreme Court agrees with Donald Trump, they are literally taking a core express power of the United States Congress and giving it to Donald Trump. And if you do it under the Constitution, that's the constitutional right of the president, there's no going back.
Yeah.
Right? So I think they have to understand that the impact on the global economy is disastrous. Tariffs are causing inflation. There's all kinds of numbers about job losses and food costs. I mean, we're all living it, and it affects our standing globally. It affects the value of the dollar and the legitimacy of the U.S. economy as the kind of the leading powerhouse, which gives us what people call soft power. It gives us authority around the globe to negotiate other kinds of things. That's exactly why Justice Kavanaugh wants to give this power to Donald Trump. But I think the justices have to know, wait, this is actually not good for maybe some of our friends on Wall Street, or some of our friends who are billionaires, or some of our friends in other parts of the world. So I do think it's going to be a split decision. I think it was pretty clear from the ruling, from the oral argument, that he's going to lose. How they frame that to make sure he doesn't get angry with them and say, I'm done. I don't know. And one thing you didn't mention, I don't know if you saw, Glenn, there was the Ozempic, the announcement of the deal on Ozempic in the White House. The CEO or a senior person, Ozempic, literally passed out.
Yeah.
Donald Trump was like sleeping during that. And then when this man collapsed on the floor, he was standing there almost like he wasn't even on top of what's going on. So we have all of this stuff happening, and you have to wonder, is he even making these decisions, or where is he in this? I mean, that was the other thing I think. I'm no psychologist, but that or doctor, but that's another element here that I think is complicating where we are.
Um, I have believed for a long time that people surrounding Donald Trump, whether they're, the folks who put together Project 2025, or, I mean, who knows? I have always felt like they were just drafting executive orders and sliding them under his nose, and he was signing them. They were telling him, whatever, this is great for your legacy. It's all constitutional. Don't worry about it. If he even cares whether these things are constitutional. But I don't think Donald Trump has been orchestrating really any of what has been going on. I'll go back to just 3 days into his term on January 23rd, when a Reagan appointed judge, John Coffenauer, looking at Donald Trump's, executive order trying to cross out of the Constitution the guarantee of birthright citizenship. And Judge Coffenauer said two things. One, this is blatantly unconstitutional. And two, where were the lawyers in the room when the president signed this, which was probably a rhetorical question, but the lawyers were right there, I believe, urging him to sign it. Donald Trump doesn't know the ins and outs of the Constitution. I would bet he's never read the document. So, this, I don't, yes, I think it reinforces the fact that he's completely out of the loop, if not out to lunch figuratively, by what we saw in the Oval Office,
Right.
him staring off into space while somebody is having a health incident in the Oval Office. But, and maybe someday the Republicans say, we can't have an obviously and transparently incompetent president occupying the Oval Office. I rarely hold out much hope that the Republicans in Congress will ever, stand up to Donald Trump. But let me shift focus a little bit. Um, what did you make of the not guilty verdict in the assault on a police officer case that was just handed down by the jury, I think yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a clown show that they actually insisted on moving forward with that, and we're also haven't talked about the horrific videos we continue to see of the extraordinary abuses by ICE agents dragging some preschool teacher out of a school in front of little kids. One man, assuming these videos are accurate, having a seizure, like, while they're arresting him. The level of trauma that is happening in this country, and where are the where are the lawsuits and the judges and the prosecutions of this unconstitutional, blatantly illegal behavior? Who even are these people? I mean, are they ICE? Are they government contractors? The other thing that the Supreme Court just heard, and I did a column on this, and it's not being reported about at all, was a oral argument on a case involving an attempt by one of the biggest military contractors, billions in dollars of contractors, to extend immunity to contractors. Again, on this theory of just constitutional expansiveness, that basically anything that involves wartime, they should get immunity from state negligence law. And this was on Agram Air Force Base in Afghanistan. And one of their employees made a suicide vest, went to a 5K and blew it up and killed 5 people, himself injured 17 others. There's one of the soldiers sued. So um, uh, you know this is we're at this moment with the United States Constitution where we're seeing it being abused and shredded, and then you've got the the Department of Justice, using our taxpayer dollars to go after somebody who threw a sandwich at an officer. I just, I'll put one footnote on the Donald Trump not making decisions. The one thing he might be deciding, Glenn, is retribution.
Hmm.
I mean,
Oh,
it might not be working out for him, but that's clearly that's something it sounds like he's probably locked in on, having sat through a trial himself and getting 34 felony convictions in Manhattan. He's angry. So that piece I think is there. But it's absurd. And the problem is, I think it tortures and distorts people's understanding of how the law is supposed to work.
yeah.
Like, how can you hold both of those things in your head at the same time?
No, I agree with you that I don't think he will forget the people that he perceived did him wrong or called out his, lawlessness, his abuse of the Constitution. Yeah, that I do believe he's directing. But you know what? I don't believe for a minute he's going to be successful. I was in the courtroom both during the Comey arraignment and the Letitia James arraignment, and obviously we're watching these discovery battles that are going on. We're watching how a judge has required the Department of Justice, the prosecutors, to turn over all of the audio recordings, including everything Lindsay Halligan said in the grand jury. And they are trying to find workarounds to avoid complying with that order. They've just appealed it from the magistrate judge to the full judge. And here is, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think they may be so desperate not to let the judge and by extension, ultimately the American people see what Lindsay Halligan did in the grand jury, that if push comes to shove, they could always just move to dismiss the case rather than comply with the order to turn over the audio recordings of Lindsay Halligan's grand jury presentation. I don't know that, again, that's crystal ball stuff, but boy, I think both of these prosecutions, the James prosecution and the Comey prosecution, are going to fail spectacularly, probably sooner rather than later.
Listen, the judicial system, with the exception of the Supreme Court, is functioning. When I say the exception of the Supreme Court, there were 6 judges who said the birthright citizenship clause is the birthright citizenship clause. When it went up to the Supreme Court, they took it on one of these shadow docket things. They manufactured some ruling about universal injunctions and let the executive order stand. So, but I'm proud to be part of the legal community. And as I explained to law students, I have constitutional law students this fall. You cannot have garbage facts in front of a judge. It doesn't, I mean, the system is set up to make sure the jury only hears evidence that is reliable and verifiable and accurate. And and if and if you can't produce that, the case goes away. That's just, it's not because judges are better than politicians. It's that their incentives and disincentives are in place. And then if they do something wrong, they can get reversed. I mean, the problem really right now, as I keep saying, is the United States Supreme Court. But I agree with you. And I would hope, I think if something like that were to happen, it'll either be acquittals or, as you indicate, that their Halligan is such a disaster that they just don't want that information out. Hopefully, maybe some new people in the Justice Department that are bringing these prosecutions will maybe not do it. I don't know. That would be good, because revenge prosecutions are not good for the rule of law, and they're not good for people's confidence in pushing back against this administration.
So let me ask you this, and we'll kind of finish up with this and finish where we started. What, if anything, do you think the results of the recent elections suggest or indicate for the midterms coming up? We know the Republicans are trying in any number of ways to suppress the vote, to gerrymander, um, but what caught my attention is when Donald Trump, I think, inadvertently spoke a little bit of important truth, and he said, "Well, yeah, the Republicans lost because I wasn't on the ballot." Now, guess what, sport? You ain't going to be on the ballot in the midterms either. I mean, I know it's a slightly different calculation come the midterms, but what, if anything, let me ask you, how encouraged are you, if you are encouraged, for the midterms by virtue of the results of the recent election?
It went as well as we could have, people who care about democracy could have hoped for, I think. I mean, it was really a very clear message that the Republicans should be concerned. But in politics, it's an eternity between now and the midterms, and they'll, pull out a lot of money and a lot of baloney that goes online, as well as this, that the attempts to basically rig the election process. But I was also struck by some economic indicators that have come out. U.S. employers announced 153,000 job cuts in October. Layoffs are up 175% from a year ago and 183% from last month. Student loan delinquencies rose 10%. I mean, um, credit card delinquencies are up. Annual electricity costs are up by $100. I mean, as I said earlier, I think at some point Americans are going to realize you can't blame this on Joe Biden, right? The Republicans own the government. They own the White House. They own the United States Congress. So I think that the fact that this soon people are realizing and going out to vote in not a huge election cycle, right? I mean, presidential years are the ones that people really come out. But you saw people come out in these wins, and frankly, women, ethical women in office and high office, like we saw in 2 state governor races. I think that's a wonderful thing. I think you couple that with, unfortunately, things are going to get harder and harder with this guy in charge.
Yeah.
Um, the best thing for us is to see a swell of people engaging and saying, "This is my country. This is my family. This is my money that's going to destroy the White House and literally destroy and bulldoze the White House." He's making billions off of his crypto, pardoning his buddies, things like that. And I think there could be this shows maybe a turning point where Americans are like, "No, this is our country, and it's not blue versus red. It's we the people." Right? Our ancestors, some of our ancestors fought a Revolutionary War around that. And Glenn, that was that was like so radical. They came from a continent where there was hereditary monarchies for thousands of years. And they came to the United States and they said, "No, we don't want that anymore." And they really broke new ground on a system of government, in theory, that really is about the power in the people. And our system wasn't going well for quite a long time. Uh, the Supreme Court had demolished a lot of the Voting Rights Act. There's so much money in politics. Things have not been working for the American people for a long time. And I think, best case scenario, not only do we come out of this, but we come out of this and build something better. And that was not going to happen without this kind of rupture. And unfortunately, people have to feel it in their lives, I think, to actually make this a priority.
And the only way we will be in a position to build something better if we hold accountable the people who are responsible for trying to destroy this democracy, trying to destroy and undermine the legitimacy of our institutions of government. If we neglect, again, to hold them accountable, the way I think Merrick Garland, unfortunately, was not up to the task to holding Trump and company accountable the first time around, then I think we have given up all hope of building something better or even rebuilding what we had.
Well, people are going to do bad things if there's not a consequence.
Yeah.
So there has to be a consequence, or will continue to live in a lawless society and just hope that only the good guys get in power and that will check themselves. The George Washingtons that declined a third term in office and was offered a crown and said no. I mean, we can hope for that, Glenn, but in this moment, they're few and far between in terms of the folks that are in power. So I think you're right. There has to be some kind of truth and reconciliation committee, process. There has to be, widespread accountability for these crimes, these transgressions of laws. So the message is clear. This is not working. It's not going to be acceptable in American government again. But without that, I agree. We're just passing on this mess to our children and our grandchildren, and that's the part that keeps me in the fight.
Yeah, and that's why we will continue to fight for our children, for our grandchildren, for everybody's children and
Yes,
grandchildren. I want our kids and our grandkids to be able to experience what we experienced growing up and not have to worry about whether they're going to live in a democracy or a dictatorship. Plenty of other things to worry about. Worry about policy,
yes.
but
Speech. Worry if they post something on you know, Instagram or Snapchat, that there's gonna be the government's gonna be, push back on that or them or their friends. I mean, that's we can't even fathom what that is like to live in that kind of a country. We've been very, very blessed.
yeah,
And I don't want my kids to have to think about that. And the same with everybody on this call.
and that's why we're here fighting, and we will continue to fight all day, every day. So thank you for jumping on, Kim. Let's plan to try to do it again next week when we have more legal developments. And hopefully we will continue to move in a good direction. I think the last 48 hours have nudged us in a good direction. Not that we're going to rest on our laurels
No.
by any means. I think we're just getting warmed up and
It's
we're
the
going to have
best
to stay
news.
in the fight.
It's the best news we've had since January 25th, or frankly, since November of
Yeah.
2024. And let me just add to your folks, I have my own Substack, so please follow if you want to get breakdowns of legal news. I call it the Little Law School.
Yes, please follow Kim's Substack. And Kim, thank you for always being willing to jump on with us.
Oh, it's such a pleasure.
All
Thanks,
right.
Glenn. All right, bye.
See you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.